Hello, Midnights. We hope you enjoy our stories. Next up, the Whittaker family. Let us know where you are listening from, and don't forget to subscribe. Forward, the calculus of isolation. This account delves into the profound tragedy of the Whittaker family of Odd, West Virginia, a living case study in systemic abandonment and the unforgiving laws of genetics. Their profound isolation, rooted in the chronic extractive economics and geographic barriers of the Appalachian Plateau, created a secluded genetic isolate. The core of their plight lies in inbreeding or consanguinity, a practice that exponentially increases homozygosity, the chance of offspring inheriting two identical recessive genes from a common ancestor. This phenomenon, known as inbreeding depression, dramatically raises the risk of severe autosomal recessive disorders, leading directly to the cognitive and physical disabilities observed in the family. Quantified by the coefficient of inbreeding, their situation is a stark public manifestation of a biological risk that remains a concern in isolated populations worldwide. Beyond the genetic burden, the Whittaker narrative is an ethical firestorm. Their story, popularized by documentarians, ignited a massive charity effort, yet simultaneously fueled accusations of exploitation and the perpetuation of the harmful hillbilly stereotype. Their fragile future is a battleground where the immediate, life-saving impact of charity clashes with the long-term imperative of policy reform, demanding sustainable healthcare, infrastructure, and an end to the socio-economic neglect that created this human drama. The Whittaker family is not merely a curiosity, they are a devastating symbol of where the American social safety net fails, challenging us to look past sensationalism and confront the uncomfortable truth about poverty, genetics, and human dignity in the digital age. The Whittaker family, residing in the nearly invisible community near Odd, West Virginia, is more than a tragic curiosity. Their lives, documented by filmmaker Mark Laita, represent a profound, living case study of internal colonialism and systemic abandonment. They embody the catastrophic confluence of deep geographical seclusion, chronic socio-economic neglect, and the unforgiving mechanics of population genetics. The Whittakers are an embodiment of the consequences that result when a community is left outside the boundaries of modern state intervention and economic integration. To fully grasp the Whittakers' reality, one must dissect the triple layers of isolation that created their predicament: the geographical, the economic, and the resulting genetic confinement. The region's mountainous topography is the original and most relentless catalyst of their condition. The Appalachian Plateau, a formidable physical barrier, created small, isolated settlements known as hollers. For the Whittakers, the seclusion of Odd, West Virginia, meant exclusion from the 20th century infrastructure boom, leading to a profound condition of social distance, a psychological and infrastructural gap separating them from mainstream society. This physical barrier created a social isolation, which in turn enforced strict endogamy, marriage within the group, and consanguinity, inbreeding. This established a genetic isolate where the lack of outside gene flow for generations makes the population highly susceptible to the effects of genetic drift and the founder effect. The poverty is not circumstantial but historical. Appalachia was historically treated as a sacrifice zone under the classic core periphery model of global capitalism. The timber and coal industries extracted immense capital wealth, but the profits flowed out to urban cores, leaving the periphery. The Appalachian valleys, with environmental devastation, a lack of diversified industry, and a decimated tax base. The Whittakers' reliance on subsistence and meager benefits is a direct result of this long-term extractive economic model, reinforcing what sociologists term structural poverty. The Whittaker family unit reveals the direct, tragic consequences of this severe isolation. The core documented family group consists of siblings Betty, Lorene, Ray, and Timmy Whittaker. Betty, the primary caretaker, represents the deep cultural ethic of fierce, localized kinship. Her devotion highlights how family bonds must function as the entire social safety net when the state fails. Ray Whittaker, largely nonverbal, communicates through unique vocalizations and gestures. His condition, along with the severe physical and cognitive disabilities in others, exemplifies the family's plight. The dependence on Betty, compounded by the dilapidated housing conditions, underscores the chronic nature of their deprivation. The disabilities seen in the family are strongly linked to the genetic effects of sustained isolation and consanguinity. Genealogists speculate that the immediate parents of the core Whittaker siblings were likely first cousins or double first cousins. The danger here lies in the concentration of autosomal recessive disorders. When two close relatives reproduce, the probability of their offspring inheriting two copies of the identical, rare, harmful recessive gene is dramatically increased. This risk is precisely quantified by the coefficient of inbreeding. In cases of multiple, successive generations of close-kin marriage, this F value rises exponentially, maximizing the manifestation of these severe disorders, affecting everything from physical development to neurocognitive function. Furthermore, the resulting unique communication patterns observed are a form of endogenous linguistic adaptation, which further entrenches their isolation from external society. The public's intense gaze upon the Whittakers is refracted through several persistent, often cruel trends in American history. The family's destitution challenges the political legacy of the war on poverty of the 1960s. More chillingly, the fascination with their genetics connects directly to the eugenics movement of the early 20th century. By intensely focusing on the inbreeding narrative, the modern public risks echoing this history, effectively depoliticizing their poverty by framing it as a biological inevitability. This is tied to the persistent cultural stereotyping of the hillbilly, which allows the dominant culture to engage in hillbilly baiting, rationalizing the region's poverty by blaming the victims rather than systemic failure. The act of documenting the Whittaker family is perhaps the most ethically complex layer of the entire story. The core accusation is exploitation and sensationalism. The powerful utilitarian defense is that shock is the price of awareness, and the tangible good of the philanthropic outcome justifies the uncomfortable means. This debate hinges on informed consent for subjects with limited cognitive capacity, with the arrangement framed as a transaction where the loss of privacy is exchanged for a generational escape from extreme material destitution. The global reaction to the Whittaker story is highly divergent. Local residents often express anger and frustration, seeing the stereotype as cultural violence. Western cultures often react with pity and humanitarian duty. Individuals from collectivist cultures may admire the fierce devotion as a necessary model of familial resilience. Medical professionals view the family as a tragic case study in population genetics, demanding attention to public health outreach. The specific tragedy of the Whittaker family functions as a powerful, contemporary microcosm of four critical global challenges. The situation highlights the severe geographic maldistribution of genetic specialists, forcing rural populations worldwide to face diagnostic delays and costly travel. This is severely exacerbated by the digital divide in rural Appalachia, where the chronic broadband access deficit blocks modern, cost-effective solutions like virtual genetic counseling, turning a technological solution into another layer of spatial inequality. The economic destitution of the family is a textbook example of spatial inequality. The region's history of extractive industries parallels the economic crises faced by communities in the global South whose land and resources are exploited by external interests. The family's reliance on SNAP and other public assistance underscores that even in a wealthy nation, geographic isolation creates health and poverty disparities that demand continuous state intervention. The controversy over the documentation is at the heart of a critical global debate in media ethics. The dilemma pits the principle of do no harm against the utilitarian defense, where the necessary level of shock is argued to be justified by the resulting philanthropic outcome. This case renews the discussion on voluntary consent when the financial transaction represents the only viable escape from lifelong destitution. The Whittaker story holds critical short and long-term implications, demanding specific and sustained intervention beyond simple charity, enforcing a continuous ethical reckoning. The public intervention, fueled by viral media attention, provided a life-saving, albeit fragile, external lifeline, while the family was successfully moved from their dilapidated shack to a more secure home, a critical measure against acute material poverty. This solution introduced new vulnerabilities and complexities. The ongoing care of the most severely disabled members, like Ray, Lorene, and Timmy, remains a paramount concern. Recent updates, as of mid-2025, have shown Ray Whittaker receiving significant personal care, including his first shower ever, and haircuts, highlighting a marked, if belated, improvement in hygiene and well-being facilitated by the ongoing involvement of certain support figures. These moments, while heartwarming, dramatically underscore how severe their prior neglect was and how utterly reliant they remain on external aid for basic personal hygiene and quality of life improvements, such as Timmy's first visit to a gym or a bookstore. The initial documentation by Mark Laita, Soft White Underbelly, which began as early as 2004 and gained viral attention around 2020, created a massive funding stream. However, the success of the charity model led to a fragmentation of the family's documentation involving multiple, often competing, figures. This proliferation has intensified the ethical crisis. Transparency and accountability scrutiny arose regarding the management of the charity funds, prompting Laita to publicly provide receipts to address accusations of exploitation. The internal conflict among those claiming to help has made the family's care a public spectacle, raising questions about whether the family is being protected or used as a continuous source of monetized drama. Consent is a continuous transaction. The sheer volume of videos produced by various creators, often focusing on the most personal and intimate details of the family's life, means the family is forced to live in a state of continuous, highly lucrative surveillance. Their privacy has been permanently exchanged for a survival fund, turning their very existence into an ongoing ethical quandary. The death of Larry Whittaker, the reported death of Larry Whittaker, further underscores the urgency and fragility of the family structure, as each loss increases the burden on the remaining primary caregiver, Betty, and highlights the need for sustainable, professional, long-term care. The story demands tangible, long-term policy action focused on integrating these isolated populations. Moving beyond the sensationalism of the inbred family trope, mandated rural healthcare outreach, and genetic counseling, this requires sustained funding for mobile clinical units and the deployment of genetic counselors to provide informed reproductive choices in isolated Appalachian hollers. The goal must be to interrupt the cycle of recessive disorders without resorting to historical eugenic impulses. Infrastructure investment. As socio-economic equity, true integration requires mandatory high-speed broadband, internet access to enable telemedicine and remote education, correcting the long-term spatial inequality. This must be coupled with sustained investment in non-extractive economic diversification, reform of disability support and guardianship. The family's situation exposes the severe limitations of current SSI, supplemental security income, and Medicaid programs. The ethical and logistical complexities surrounding the family's financial management also point to the critical need for robust, transparent, and non-exploitative legal guardianship and financial trusteeship for cognitively vulnerable adults. The Whittaker family's story has cemented its place as the clearest modern example of utilitarian ethics in documentary filmmaking. It forces a conversation that defines the digital age. At what point does the tangible, life-saving good of charity outweigh the ethical harm of exploiting human dignity and reinforcing destructive cultural stereotypes? Their lives remain an unforgettable demonstration of human endurance and a stark, unblinking mirror, held up to the places where the American promise of equitable care and opportunity has yet to reach. The story of the Whittaker family, resting in the shadows of odd West Virginia, is far more than a shocking spectacle. It is a profound and difficult mirror held up to society. Their existence demonstrates the brutal arithmetic of inbreeding depression, where the geographic and socio-economic isolation of the Appalachian holler acts as a petri dish for genetic risk. The increase in homozygosity for deleterious recessive traits is a verifiable biological event, leading to the heartbreaking disabilities that define their public image. This is a scientific tragedy rooted in systemic neglect. The ongoing documentation has forced a painful public debate on the ethics of exploitation versus humanitarian aid. The money raised for their security, a necessary lifeline, comes at the cost of their dignity and continuous surveillance, highlighting the profound ethical burden placed on cognitively vulnerable subjects in the age of viral media. The family's dependence on this fragile external charity means their long-term well-being is permanently linked to the unpredictable ebb and flow of public attention. Ultimately, the Whittakers represent an unavoidable legacy and an unfinished task. They stand as a testament to the resilience of kinship in the face of absolute abandonment, while simultaneously serving as a crucial, urgent case study, a call for sustainable public health intervention, including mandatory rural genetic counseling and robust disability services. Their plight demands a reckoning with the historical forces of extractive economics and isolation that still leave vulnerable communities outside the reach of the American promise of equitable care. The curiosity will fade, but the structural failures that created the Whittaker family must not. Their survival, bought by public spectacle, now compels governmental action.